Mayor Garcetti, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
You picked an interesting time, though, to come to Asia. You've been to Japan, you've been to Vietnam, you've been to South Korea, now Hong Kong. What are those countries saying to you when it comes to this trade war? Because obviously LA is right in the middle of this storm.
I think they're beginning to see that rhetoric isn't enough. You need to have results. There's fair questions to raise, and nobody faults, I think, our president or anybody else for raising them. But if you just ratchet things up and can't actually produce any outcomes, real outcomes, not ones that are self-declared victories, but to see us, for instance, double the number of businesses that export, or to invest in alternative energy, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, semiconductors, the way China very impressively is doing that, how will we compete for the future? We want to be engaged in the world. LA just recently won the Olympics, and my pitch was, remind us how important the world is by coming to Los Angeles. But that's not a lesson LA needs to learn. We have 224 languages spoken, largest populations of dozens of countries outside their homeland in LA. So global culture is our local culture, and that's what's made us, I think, so successful. That's something I'd like to see the rest of America prosper from as well. But building walls and building barriers make it very difficult for that prosperity to get to the middle part of our country too.
But it's near inevitable, though, isn't it, that business is going to be affected, both LA, Hong Kong, LA, China, LA, anywhere in Asia. There is going to be some impact that's felt.
Well, that's our message, first of all, is that we want folks in Asia to know that in Los Angeles, as Americans, we want to see these issues resolved because we depend on that trade. We depend on that investment in tourism. We estimate that as much as 20% of our, for instance, cargo container trade may be affected in the Port of LA, the largest in the Americas. That means real jobs in my city. Those are people who depend on that. The price of steel already going up because of tariffs endangers some of our construction projects, the timelines and the costs. We have a ton of momentum, so I'm not worried yet that this will cause some sort of turning back or a recession, but this is how recessions start. This is how conflict escalates. And so it's very incumbent upon us to continue to show our own leaders domestically that a lot of Americans depend on this relationship for their well-being, and vice versa, that our strategic relationships are stronger when we're engaged together instead of pulling apart. And I think people to people can always be powerful for national leaders.
It seems as though the left hand doesn't really know what the right hand is doing when it comes to federal-state relationships there. Is protectionism working then in that case?
We want to see fair trade. That's a reasonable discussion to have. And there's a lot of discussions we haven't had in decades about protectionism that exists not just in other countries, but even in the United States. That's important. But if you don't have a strategy for the outcome, if you don't have a framework within to negotiate that, this can be incredibly destructive.